It's kind of fucking scary to me, man. The whole fucking thing is like a goddamn weird David Lynch apocalyptic sci-fi film. Dystopia is the fucking word. Yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are live. Kindle Project with Saul Seibert of Boohag here in Kindle Project today. I kind of would like to say you probably don't need much of an introduction, but if you had to frame that for yourself, how would you want to be introduced? Nope, not tackling that one.
I'm not hackling that one.
All right, that's fine. Fair enough. For those of you who don't know, Saul's lead singer, lead guitar of the duo Boohag here out of Columbia, touring all over the Southeast in the next coming year. So if you guys hear about these guys, you need to check that out. But we're going to kind of diverge away from the normal conversation bullshit and try to delve into some things people don't know or are maybe interested in your ideas about some stuff. So stuff we haven't necessarily talked about a lot of, but I think it's there for us to talk about. I think the best place to start, is there anything that people don't know about you that maybe that would be kind of cool to share with them or share with us about that? Other than music-related type stuff. And in a good way. Like, now I'm not trying to find a gossip or anything like that, but I just was wondering if there was some cool little tidbit that you might think people find interesting that you would want them to know about you.
No, I can't think of anything I want people to know about me.
But you write too, but that's stuff like that. I mean, other artistic outlets you have for yourself. I mean, you're a writer as well, isn't it? Other than a musician too.
Yeah, I write. But I think as far as what I do outside of music,
Get that a little close to you, man.
what I do outside of music or performance or artwork, man, I'm just kind of a regular dude. I really enjoy fishing, for instance.
All right, good. Okay, there you go. That's what I'm
So
talking about.
I like to fish when I can and when I have the opportunity to. I also am a reader. I like to dive into a good old book.
Right.
And,
Are you a nonfiction guy or a fiction guy?
I used to be a nonfiction person where I just read for content and, information or whatever. And as I've gotten older, I'm not sure what's happened, but, I do like a good story. So if somebody can write, a really good, intriguing story, then it's easy for me to dive into the books. So I'm a nature guy, man. When we're off the road, that's something Scott Tempo and I have in common. We both really enjoy nature, which takes us away from, the band aspect and music and things of that sort. So on my spare time, if I can get out and into
the woods?
Yeah, man.
On the river and on the creek or whatever?
Wherever the fuck, man. I mean, just away. Just away. That's to me.
Is that something that happened? Is that a childhood thing? Like you grew up outside?
No. It's just been more or less like an increasing need or desire or passion of mine. I started working for a guy a few years back, and he was the horticulturalist for the zoo in Columbia, and I started doing garden installations with him, and then we would kind of take these little detours and go off into the mountains, or and he would talk about the plants that are around us, and
Why they're native to this area.
Yeah.
Give you like a little general history of.
oh, he was a
The
totally
world
like
you're living
he's a naturalist, you know, and so it was just really intriguing because this is a world that we are from and yet so completely disconnected from now that it really resonated kind of with where I'm at, you know. And so fishing, if I can hunt, I'll hunt. I'm not a nightlife guy, surprisingly.
Really? Yeah.
If it was given like a night out on the town or, you know,
You're getting up early and going fishing.
I'm up early fishing. You know, that's where I would.
Are you a
probably-
cane pole guy, or do you have, if you had to say, I'm going fishing, are you a rod and reel, bass guy, worm, fake lures, and all that stuff? Or are you give me a cup of worms and a back box of crickets?
Whatever works.
Whatever works. I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, I started fishing the inlets of Florida, which you can kind of, it's brackish water, so you
Yeah.
can pull. I mean, you're going down in a little, you know, canoe, and you see an alligator on the bank, but you also are pulling like rock bass out and trout, and I mean, you never know. Like, you know, your radar can tell you, or sonar or whatever it is, that can tell you, like, man, there's fucking dolphins swimming under me, and yet I'm pulling out, you know, typically like freshwater fish. And so
That's cool.
there was like a big learning curve as far as baits and, you know, what you're fishing for. And
That's it. I've done a lot of fishing in my life, but I've never done fish in that salt water where you catch freshwater stuff and vice versa, or that where it's mixed. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's
Yeah.
I'm sure that's a double whammy as far as the ecology of that, all the fish and bugs and everything they're eating.
live bait.
Yeah,
Live bait.
Eating shrimp.
Yeah, just live bait,
crawfish,
man.
whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Get some mullet, chop it up. I mean, whatever. I mean, it sounds crude, but
No, that's it, man. That's, you know, my thing is when I grew up, if you ask me, I've done a lot of fishing. My dad's a big bass fisherman, got the boat and the whole nine, has had it for years. I prefer an umbrella on the end of a long pier on a lake, and a box of crickets and a cane pole and a 12-pack of beer and a radio. You know,
yeah.
that was something that you grew. Even of course when I was a kid, I didn't have the beer, but sitting out there with a radio and a hat, a big brimmed hat, and just sitting there all day, and that shade of that pier just pulling up
Oh, yeah.
brim hand size all day long.
oh yeah,
And then you take them right off, cut them up,
Man,
deep
I don't
fry
even-
those things,
I don't
man.
even fucking cut them up, man. I just take those panfish, man, and just fry the fuck out
Yeah,
of them.
yeah.
And just, you know, fork them out. But I mean, I think when I lived in New Orleans, I'd fish, you know, the Pontchartrain or fish, you know, the bayous, everything from crawfish to, you know, sheephead to whatever the fuck, you know, you wherever you were at. So, and I just really, not to romanticize it, but, you know, there's something about being away and,
Quiet.
yeah, man.
There's something about silence, isn't it? I mean, really, like you quiet. When I'm going to say silence, like not a deprivation chamber, but when you're outside and it's quiet, and being able
Oh,
to
yeah.
enjoy that
Especially early mornings, late at night, you know.
when it's quiet.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, I first started fishing in South Carolina. I was probably 15, and I was traveling through, and my older brother and I had a friend, and we would go out fishing late at night, you know, the Congaree, and just the feeling of being, even if you're fishing with people, you know, you can't feel like you're in your head, you know, you're communicating with nature or whatever, however you do it, but yeah, so that's something I enjoy doing. It's something I should probably do more of. It's just,
It's hard to fit it in.
it can be hard to fit it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but I also do a good old fashioned hike. I mean, you know, throw me up in the mountains or, put me someplace that, is
There's
away.
yeah, I hear you.
So,
Well, recently you took a hike down in, what was that? Was it Congaree National Forest down there?
yeah.
Had run into some hogs, didn't you?
Yeah. Those fuckers are mean.
Scary.
Yeah. I got up one morning and I wasn't thinking about the time or whatever. It was like 3:30, and I roll out of bed, and I just had this hankering, and I was like, I'm just gonna go out to Congaree National Forest and take a hike. And they have the wooden like walkways, the boardwalks and everything like that. And then off the boardwalks, they got these like signs that have trails, and you walk the trails, and there'll be little signs that tell you how to make it back alive. And man, it was like the dead of summer, and the mosquitoes were they're just eating me alive. And I hadn't thought about anything, and I started walking. I said, I'm going to get off this boardwalk, and it was probably like, by that time, it was probably like 4:30 in the morning.
So it's black. It's dark.
It's just, dude, it's dark, man. You can't see shit. You can't see your fucking hand in front of your face. And we have had floods.
Right.
And so a lot of those trails were like under reconstruction. And man, I'd hiked, 2 miles in and did not know where the fuck I was. And these wild boar, I could hear something, and all I had was keys, thank God, and I would just start rattling my keys because I didn't know what the fuck was out there, man. And there's these boars, these wild boars with husks and everything, and they're standing like 4 foot off the fucking ground, man.
Right next to you?
You
could hear them.
You could hear them in the distance. They couldn't necessarily hear you, or if they could, they didn't give a fuck. Right. And I walked up on this, I would assume would be the mother, and she had probably like, I don't know how many other boar around, little baby pigs running around. And it was terrifying, man, because it was like a standoff. And, of course, Congaree has all those, like, that wetlands.
Yeah.
And so the only
Like
thing I thought was, well, if they charge me, I'll run into the water, which is equally terrifying.
Sure. Probably there's gators and all that shit down there, too, right?
Yeah, so eventually the sun came out, and I just walked and walked and walked. And I think I came out, after being in there since, like, probably 4:30 in the morning, I think I came out at around maybe 11.
Whoa.
Yeah, I was lost, motherfucker.
Oh, wow.
I was lost.
From 4 to 11.
Yeah,
before that.
But you try to find those moments of serenity in there, but it's not necessarily like if you feel lost out there, man.
You got to get it together. All right,
You're just looking for fucking trails, man. You're just looking for.
Well, you're looking for daylight too, man, right?
Fucking A, man. No doubt about it, baby.
Looking for a clearing. Come on, man, and find out where I'm going.
It makes for good stories, and at the end of the day, I had a blast.
Yeah. But this was one of those things that you were saying. You just got to do it. You got to get out, and I got to go.
Oh yeah.
I got to see what's happening.
Yeah, roll the dice.
Yeah, see what happens. Well, I got to look at my notes here. Let's see. You mentioned it earlier about we're talking about going out seeking other things, and how does it help your creative process? Because you've talked about this. Let me try to put it in perspective. I like this analogy you use. You talk about like when, as a creative person, there's a faucet that can get turned on, right? And sometimes we've talked about that, the ability to turn that faucet on whenever you want to. Mm-hmm. Being out in nature, does it help that, or is that just something completely opposite of that? Something away from that? Like I go do that just to get away from that creative process, to get away from that faucet, whether it's on or not?
I think it's both and.
Both and?
Yeah, you reap the benefits of like Taking a break, you know.
For me personally, when I do things like that, it's out of the blue, creative problem that I was trying to solve is solved in a second.
You have that happen?
Yeah, I've had that happen, and I seek that
Damn,
out.
man.
It's something that you can't, I can't recreate.
Yeah, no.
Do you know what I mean?
understand, yeah.
You know, I heard a story of kids, like a 14-year-old piano virtuoso on NPR recently, and he was talking about, he's also a math whiz, and he said that one of the things he does is play the piano, and he can solve math problems in the back. It doesn't quite work like that for me, but I wish it did. You know what I'm saying? Like I could say that I pick up the guitar for 5 minutes, and it could solve the problems that are happening with the sculptures in the room.
Yeah.
Do you know? And sometimes I try that, and it does help with the distraction, but it's not this immediate. So going outside is not this immediate conduit for clearing your creative focus.
I think that's a different type of crazy. Like I can't solve problems when I'm playing an instrument.
Okay.
You know, I mean, that's we all come from different contexts, and
Sure.
our brains are all wired differently. So I go out because I have to. You know, it's
Right.
like some people do whatever their hobby is or whatever their outside interests are from their daily grind. I'm not much different than that. You know, I mean, I really do try to turn off. You know, I really do try to get away. You know, and you know, but when I do get away, when I come back, and I'm revived and refreshed, I realize how important it is to the creative process.
Yeah.
If that makes.
No, it totally
makes
makes sense.
sense.
Absolutely.
But I don't want to go out and into creation and be thinking about
What you should be doing.
tour dates or something that is that pertains to the art or the music or whatever. It's just not. I'm trying to turn off, and nature to me is that volume knob.
Ah, okay. I like that volume knob analogy.
Yeah, it
Now-
turns the noise down.
You just said something that said art or music. Like, how do you balance the difference between what you do? How can you describe is there a difference between making music and making art? Or, because you obviously you're a fan of all forms of art, and visual art, I guess, being one of those. What are the parallels and the differences between quote unquote making music and making art, whatever that is?
Well, I think that, and again, everybody has their interpretation or their definition of this stuff.
Sure.
But I see art as alchemy. You're taking, in order to produce art, you're taking time, which is not in our control ultimately, and then you're taking bulk, pulp material, and you're trying to marry them, and that just takes a lot of fucking time, man.
It does.
And as far as the creative process, I think it's happening all of the time. I think it's marinating. It's a marination, and so whether you're talking about visual art or auditory art or performance art, your hope is that, good art becomes artifacts for not only the artist but also contemporary culture at large. And so they all marry. You can't tap the fluidity of that.
Sure.
Film may be a perfect example. It's like a cornucopia of those things. You have
Right. You can use everything
Yeah.
under that umbrella.
Yeah. And so, you write a song because you saw a beautiful piece of scenery, and then, or, you know, you do a painting because you heard a beautiful song. All of these things marry, and I'm not sure they should be separated. I mean, it's arguable.
You keep talking. That's something
So I don't separate them.
you don't separate.
No.
I don't think you should. I agree, and the reason I used to when I was in art school and I started thinking about like what did I want to make, when I really understood what it meant to be a professional artist and make work in a contemporary setting. I think you see it now at the drawings that I make, but I wanted to make drawings that people would hear.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
That, yeah.
And so now I have understanding that all those things can be incorporated into an experience. I can make drawings that you can hear. I can make sculptures that you hear, and I think what you're talking about, you're thinking about art in a multidimensional experience. So does that inform how you choose to make music? Like, for anybody that's listened that have never seen you guys live, like it's a very visceral, physical thing that happens. And even if you listen to the recordings of the albums, it's very physical. So is that conscious? Or is it just natural? You just kind of go at it in a natural way. That's like, this is what I feel like it works. So I'm doing it this way. Or is it like I'm going to use all these tools to do A, B, and C instead of saying I'm just going to do my thing and let it all flow?
Well, I think you have to be intentional about your artwork. And so that takes, you have to take into account of a lot of different things, you can be an amazing songwriter and just be a shitty performer.
Okay.
So, we've all been subjected to that. Like,
sure.
Man, he's a great songwriter, but fuck.
Can't carry your
I'm
tune,
snoozing, man.
Yeah.
The answer to that is I don't know.
Fair enough.
I don't know.
But you're answering about saying like you have to be intentional.
You have to be intentional, but I think if you're if it's contrived or disingenuous, then I think that will be communicated. I think people are smart, and I think they can smell the fart in the car.
Yeah.
And if something is not legitimate, that they will disengage. And it may not happen right away, but they will slowly disengage. And so
I'm just changing our timer here. We're good to go. Keep talking, man.
I feel like I can only speak from a personal context. I think for me, I don't think about.
You don't say, I'm going to write A, B, and C. And this is how I'm going to do it on stage. This is what Scott's going to do, whatever. It's much more primitive.
God
than that.
damn,
Okay.
no.
Not that intentional.
No, you have to be intentional about branding. You have to be intentional about the initial impact people have of your art. Otherwise they're just going to see it as a street sign or whatever. So
a logo, brand.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think that there's an aesthetic aspect to it, and that's important. But if the experience the viewer, the listener has is the opposite of that, then, or if they sense like a degree of, if it's not sincere, they understand that, they get that. So for me, and I believe for Scott, we don't script. We don't script. Not live performance. Fuck no.
Yeah.
No way in hell.
Other than set list.
Sometimes.
Fair enough. Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, I hear it.
Because I don't know our set list.
Except for the piece of paper in front of you?
Yeah, but most of the time Scott has that. Okay. Most of the time, we decide on a set list. We will practice it, and then we'll have like a few songs that are variables. Like, if this song is like, if I can't pull this, I mean,
You fill the room a bit.
yeah, fuck yeah, man.
Yeah.
Because
Like,
I mean, if
let's
it's
cut that. Use
yeah,
that instead.
yeah,
Flip it.
yeah, absolutely.
That's cool.
And I think that's part of the fluidity of art.
I think that that's what separates artists from performers in a bit, is that being open to that that improvisation, open to the fact that could change in a moment.
Yeah.
And being say, okay, that it's not going to work. That I need to switch directions. Because you guys aren't a jam band by all means, but that decision making process is improvisation. You're making decisions that what's happening on stage, what's happening in the room, what's going to serve the art.
If you want bookends, buy the fucking CD.
Okay. Yeah, I get it.
Or the record or wherever the fuck it is. Mm-hmm. Like, the songs or the album is just one prism of the experience of music. Then you go to the live performance. And if the live performance is the exact prism of the album, well, then, okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that makes the album come alive and the sort of that one prism, multidimensional, is to provide a live experience where they get to hear the music and then experience it in a way they haven't through listening to it.
So when did that? Can you tell when did you see the curtain? But when was the curtain pulled back? And when did you see the strings at the puppet show and that? Because when I was growing up, I got this my first concert. My parents took me to see the Oak Ridge Boys when I was like 5. Mm-hmm. But they did the songs exactly like the album. It was fun from a kid, perspective, and even when I saw Bob Seger when I was in my early 20s, the same thing. It was it was just like the album. They were great. It was an amazing show. The Bob Seger.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it wasn't nine tonight, or you know what I'm saying, or a Live Bullet. It was just like the albums.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You're like,
that's cool.
That's cool. It's cool, and I loved it.
I'm not judging.
But at a certain point, I was like, that's not music or whatever, or had an album and then finally seeing them live, and it was completely different from the album, but it was amazing. That's live music. When did that? Did you have that experience? Like, I'm not. This is great, but I'm not doing that. Or when was that live music? I was like, oh my god, that's what music could be.
I think it's more of a sense of inability. Like,
meaning,
I'm unable to do that. I mean, to reproduce what we did in a studio or in a living room live, I'm just not wired that way.
Because it's visceral. It's this thing. It's like it's coming out of you raw every time.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
absolutely. Otherwise, like, I mean, stick me in a museum and, everybody can see the same posture, the same thing. And there's beauty in that. There's absolutely beauty in that, but I don't think we're fine art. I think if you put all of your friends and all of your family in the front row of a show, you're going to play different.
Yes.
If you go to a city where nobody knows who the fuck you are, you play different.
Yes.
And so I think there is a responsibility of the artist in that regard to, like, adjust. At least for me. Like, I can tell you right now, the smaller the shows are for Scott and I, the crazier they are. Because it's just like the pressure's off and you're kind of like, let's just fucking do it and have fun.
Yeah,
You know? And
yeah.
I can't.
The house shows I've seen you guys play is very much like that. It's a tribal experience, even if you want to go that far. It feels that way.
I
right?
hope so. God,
You know,
Christ.
it's this. You know, when you guys played the video drum, it was the feeling the floor is.
Has this got whiskey in it?
Yes. Yeah, dude, help yourself. It's my drink. Go ahead. Read your thing.
You're just stronger than mine.
Sorry.
Did you put ginger ale in that?
Yeah, no, yeah, a little bit, maybe. Yeah.
Go ahead. What was this?
I don't
the
even.
video drum?
Anyway, we are way off topic now. So no, I think that there's a. Sometimes the music doesn't have to be this pristine thing. It's this other.
That's not what people, at least our audiences, they're not looking for perfection. They're looking for community. You know, they're looking for. You have 60 people, 100 people. You have 1,000 people who've listened to your album. They're all coming with their own context.
Their own projections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the smaller shows, like if you're crammed in a house and there's like 100 kids in there or whatever, I mean, the inhibition is just gone. It's gone. There's nowhere to go. There's no smoking alley in the back. There's no, I mean, they're crammed in a room.
To see something.
To experience something.
I want to continue talking about this cross-pollination between art and music, or in how that facilitates itself. Can you talk about maybe some of your first experiences, like what curled your toes and you're like, man, that's something I want to do, or that's something I want to explore. I want to be a part of that. I want to, you know what I mean?
No, I can't. I mean, there's things that have impacted me along the way. I can't recall a specific moment of when, like, you know, the transition between what I was influenced by versus what I've do now, you know, took place. I think it was much more organic.
Really?
Yeah.
I was different. I mean, there was this one moment that I still think back on. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but how I'm feeling right now is what I want to try to recreate with my work.
Yeah.
But like you said, people are different in that.
Yeah.
Do you know? And I think now where I'm at in my career, although I do revisit influences or influence things I'm interested in or whatnot, I'm much more interested in the idea of opening myself up to all those influences to make whatever I need to make. Do you know what I mean? Like, we could sit here and say, pick things apart of like artists I'm looking at now, like that's coming from that person, that's coming from that, that's coming from that, but I'm not interested in having those conversations. That's like art school type thing. And the question I ask myself, is it because I'm older and because I've made so much work and I've gone so far down the rabbit hole with my own way of making things? Is that's how you slowly start to let those things go, or you're not willing to talk about them? When does influences cease to be directly relative to what you're doing?
Well, I think the key is to continually be influenced, to be plugged into the zeitgeist, to be in touch. But I think the maturity comes in when you you stop hijacking other people's art. You know, I mean, I think that, like,
That hijacking, I like that. So yeah, keep talking. I'm sorry.
No,
I'll
I
get back
think,
to that.
I mean, for me, when I was, writing music for the first time and I picked up the guitar, it was like, I remember singing, fucking Simon and Garfunkel, Sound of Silence or whatever. And,
Okay.
it was just like, if you could play it right, you felt really good about yourself. And you were playing those songs because you liked them,
Sure.
and they impacted you at some level. I mean, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. I think the secret, I mean, at least for me, is to not stand too long on those shoulders.
Oh, I like that.
To not,
So it's almost like you step up to see.
well, just to not make somebody else's promised land yours. I mean, it's not yours, it's theirs. And so I think it's important to kill your idols. I think it's important to kind of go where they've taken you and then go further, and
Do you consciously say they didn't do this, so I'm going to do this?
no,
No.
fuck no, man.
Okay.
I mean, that's unfair.
No, I'm not saying in a judgmental way, like almost like I said, it's like an opening that I can kind of venture into, explore something that would take that idea further. Like for me, it would be like, they didn't ever put that on the floor. What if I put it on the floor?
Yeah, I'm not listening to those artists. Like, I mean,
I get it. I get it.
Yeah,
I know what you're saying. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah,
We're
yeah. I
exploring
mean,
the
like,
art music thing.
we've been continually, compared to a lot of different bands, and every time we're, kind of lumped into a category or a genre of music.
I got to get out. You pull the cord. Like,
Yeah,
I gotta
man.
get
I mean,
out.
and it's not that there's not like influences or similarities or whatever, but, I'm. There's an old kind of adage that's like, I'm like Farmer Brown's cow. I graze in everybody's field, but I produce my own milk. So, for me, it's a cornucopia. It's a number of influences. It's a number of situations or artists that have impacted you, and that gets kind of just stirred around, man. And it's up to you to figure out what kind of recipe you're going to make out of that. And so for me, I think we never set out to try to be a different or to be like a new version of this, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I can't. I remember the first time. It was like the first few times that Scott and I met, and we were practicing in this little junkyard practice space, and I remember sitting down and saying, I don't know what I've written. I don't know how it's going to sound. I don't have a grandiose vision of what it's supposed to be.
With this band. At that time, it was this band, right? It wasn't even.
It wasn't even a fucking band, man. It was like Scott and I just beating the shit out of instruments in a goddamn room with no air conditioning. And
In South Carolina.
yeah, and for hours, man, and not knowing what we had, like having no idea, and he was bringing his influences as far as drums go, and I was bringing my influences as far as, guitar goes, and it was just a blending of life experiences and music exposure and these sorts of things. And so,
Was it refreshing? Like the moment, like you're like, whoa, like I am onto something. We are onto something. Oh, feels weird. This is like new, or
no.
no? Is it
No.
painful? Like, or can you even describe it? I don't know.
No, I think it's just really messy. Just really messy. You know, you it's just really messy, man.
Mm-hmm. But it felt good.
Yeah,
That was
there's very little question as in my mind as and if any question as to why Scott and I work together. There's just an intangible quality that forces me to do this and forces him to do that, and then this is what happens. So it's a lot of sacrifice, I'm sure, on both of our ends. But I think both of us are very proud of the products we put out as far as the songs and the albums.
Now, recently you did a little solo thing, and back to the faucet idea. So you're constantly working. Generally speaking, like you have this faucet that, and I think that's another reason you and I get along well, because I have a faucet as well that I can't turn off. Sometimes I wish I could, but it doesn't always work like that. How do you work through that?
I don't.
You don't.
No. Christ, no. It's a son of a bitch.
Yeah, it is. It'll haunt you. It haunts you like a demon, right, or something like that. I like to think about it like that. I think about it as this kind of like thing that hangs over my head, or like a gray cloud that follows me around sometimes. Something like that. You can't get rid of it. You can't shake it.
No. It's a son of a bitch. There's no real. You got that?
We just edit.
You're all full of ash.
I know, I got it all over me now. At least I don't have a mustache either. Be all up in it.
What was the question?
I don't know, man. Oh, man. I don't even, what were we talking? Yeah, the faucet, not being able to turn the faucet on, off and on, and how that follows you around in this way. Like, I mean, do you get after playing 3 weekends in a row, you know, a couple double show weekends, and then all of a sudden the song hits you, you got to sit down and you're tired, you don't want to pick up the guitar, but you have to pick up the guitar. Does it work like that? Or is it the middle of the week?
I don't know, man. I mean, okay. When you find a diamond, you just pick it up. It's like
sometimes you got a mind for that diamond.
Fuck yeah, man! For months.
Yeah, you got a mind. You got a mind for
months.
It.
Yeah. I mean, Testify was a lot like that for me. Is we had just come off the Further, and you know, it was a rock and roll album, and I would question. I mean, maybe more me than Scott, but I don't think either of us probably remember making that album.
Sure you do.
Parts. Parts. I remember writing parts.
Oh, you mean how it happened, like the whole thing, like
right?
How it started? Yeah. Well, I was privy to that whole process.
I mean, maybe you would have more insight.
Well, I do. Yeah, sure. I mean, I do. But I get it. We won't get into that too much.
But Testify was much more of a calculated, intentional process, and the writing would come. I remember, I mean, literally being tortured under the weight of feeling like I want to write this kind of music. You know, it was kind of like it was a child we had adopted. You know, we just wanted to do it right. You know,
right.
And we wanted to raise it right, and we wanted to make sure that the songs and the process was very protected and preserved. And so the writing came really hard for me. Once the song was there, like once the melody kind of hit my head, It was there, but there would be days and days and days and days where I just was just beating my head up against a brick wall. And it wasn't until I just said, fuck it, I don't care. We'll tour the further for the next year. I took all this pressure off of me, you know.
Because of the follow-up idea?
I don't know if it was a follow-up idea. It was more just wanting to do something different than what had come so almost, I almost felt undeserving of the further.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was
The
just
further,
like,
really?
because, I mean, the effort was just like Scott and I just going, let's just bang out these songs, man. We're going to go in the studio. We have 4 hours. We have 6 hours, whatever. We're just going to get as many takes as we fucking can.
And then we'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And where Testify was, we had one day. And it was so different, at least in my mind, in the process and how we recorded and everything.
Definitely was not your tradition. It was almost like recording a live album, in a sense.
Well, it was. It was.
Yeah, well, that's what it was,
Live album.
ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, you were there, so maybe you'd be more qualified to talk
Well,
about
well, something that I don't want to qualify, but what got me interested in the Testify process was, of course, in our conversations, but when I found out it was almost on a dare that you took on this idea. Right? Is that right? And that's something like, and the reason I relate to that so much is like I could go back into my, my lineage of work and my own artistic development. Is there was a time when I was in New York where a group of guys that I trusted dared me to do something, and I was kind of like, all right, I can do this. But soon as I took on that challenge, I realized what I was maybe in over my head a bit, but it changed things into the future. Like I back to the idea of like giving into there was a performance I did where I thought it was going to be A and it turned into be B, and I was not prepared for B, and I had to completely commit to the process and happening. I think that's what happened on Testify. You guys you said, oh, we're going to do this. And in the moment, at certain parts in the process, you had to completely let it go and let it be what it was.
Yeah, there was an oh shit moment,
Sure.
where you jump off the cliff and you realize how high you are, and but it was welcome. Like there was no point where Scott and I did not want to do it.
I thought Scott was a lot more enthusiastic. Like he was.
Oh yeah,
he was like
definitely.
Yeah.
I think he was, and I think it debuted like his creative contribution to Boohag is that a lot of the film work and a lot of the more abstract aspects, the field recordings. I mean, probably 75% of those field recordings, if not more, I think I recorded one aspect of that. Maybe 90% was
Scott was recording at the house.
Yeah, I mean everywhere, just fucking everywhere.
Or wherever you guys were on the road or whatever.
And so, and that was awesome for me, to see, this whole other dimension of Scott, bringing his own talents to the table outside of just percussion, and even in recording. There was a lot of dialogue and a lot of question as to what was the best way to capture these songs. And Scott was always very enthusiastic about it. And I mean, Scott's punk rock.
Sure.
He's a punk rock kid, much more than I am.
But the day of recording, Scott was way more vocal by what was working, what was not working that I'd ever seen him do before. And it was very much like I had this in my head. I don't know if you remember this. Remember when Jay was tuning the snare drum that morning?
No.
It was Scott was like, just let me play, And Jay was like, I gotta get it right, I gotta get it right. And he'd tune it, do something, he'd come back out.
Okay, yeah, I do.
And Scott was like, behind it. You can see Scott would never say that. Like he was like, but I could see that. He's like, I'm just chomping at the bit at that. Like I know I'm ready to get it over with. And I think that was probably in general all of us that day because we had to postpone it. We were ready a month ahead of time. We had to postpone it for whatever. I can't remember what reason.
I can't remember.
But and then by the time we recorded, everybody was like focused in. We're going to get this done.
I remember sitting after everything was done and everybody was gone. I remember Scott and I were sitting at the pool. There was a pool outside, and we're sitting in these lawn chairs. And I remember just feeling completely unfulfilled, not knowing what we had come up with, And
well, that's fair. That was also fair with what we had, because we had been all day,
all fucking day, and it started
over and over again.
Fucking again, but to just kind of continue to like highlight Tempo's work on it. He was so much more honest about things. Like he doesn't manicuring is not a part of his DNA. Like he doesn't try to manicure the music, and he keeps me accountable in a large way.
In that when he doesn't manicure the music, he keeps you more honest, or is there two separate things?
There probably is two separate things, but I value so much that objective,
keeps you in check type thing.
Yeah, because I can tinker, motherfucker.
I hear you.
I can tinker something to death. And so a lot of
Would you tinker more if there were not those people around you?
Oh yeah.
And that's a fault. You see that as a fault.
It's a fault, and it's also a desire to surround yourself around people that have gift sets that are different than yours. That if you're gonna collaborate, which any band does, unless you're a solo artist and you're just sitting there going, play this chord, do this at this point in time. As an artist, you're giving up a lot. And if you're just a musician, if you're just somebody who plays, then I think that can be hard, And Scott has such a primal approach to things, like he's just so completely in the moment of things.
Aggro too, or just
no,
or just like, or he's much more intellectually in what's happening, or maybe not. I don't know,
man.
But it works.
That guy's a conundrum. I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Hey, you ventured into the Tempo realm.
Tempo is one of the most beautiful souls I've ever met in my life. He's an adorable person. He's passionate. He's engaged. He's really pure when it comes to the music. He doesn't try to dilute things. He's not interested in.
Also, back to our point a minute ago, talking about our heroes. Scott's so, lack of a better term, well-read musically.
Oh yeah,
like crazy.
Yeah. He's got everybody in Colombia has these record collections that they're boasting of, and they have no idea.
They have no idea.
They have no idea. When we go on the road, the records he brings home.
Really?
Yeah, he's hitting every fucking record store there is.
Really? I didn't know that. That's a tidbit, ladies and gentlemen. On Boohag on the Road, Scott spends all his money on records. Well, maybe not all his money, but there you go.
He don't spend a lot of money. But he's definitely a collector, and he has an eye for what he likes, and and that sort of thing. And so,
I knew Scott's breadth in music, like as a reputation. And I remember the first time we talked about like influences, he was like so past all that. He was just like, yeah, I just play, man.
he
knows
fishes
it
in the
all.
ocean.
Yeah.
He fishes in the ocean, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
He knows all the fish.
Yeah. Yep.
He knows all the fish.
That's a fucking fact.
Yep.
I'm like, have you heard this? He's like, I'll send him a message and I'll be like, check this out. And he's like, oh man, the B-side of this fucking song.
Third song on the B-side. But if you
yeah,
got this other
dude.
album, this other
Fuck
EP
yeah.
that nobody knows about, check this EP out. And the second side, the whole thing. Awesome. Yeah.
That's tempo.
Yeah. For sure. Talk to me about the differences between being a guitar player and a singer, and how is that terrifying? Because me as an amateurist player, singing and playing is incredibly difficult, but you take on another side of that by being a two-piece, and you're having to marry being a rhythm guitar player and then playing riffs, if that's the best way to describe that. Would you rather do one or the other, or do you care, or how do you negotiate that? Talk to me about that process of being the guitar player and the singer and writing and.
Oh, man, it's a love-hate relationship. I'm not a polished guitarist. I've played guitar most of my life, but I was mostly indoctrinated into guitar playing through folk music.
From a traditional
Yeah.
perspective, like, you know what I mean, like that's singer-songwriter accompaniment type thing, rhythm.
Yeah, my grandfather played bluegrass, and my grandmother played piano, and my mother played guitar, and my uncle played guitar, and it was very just like kind of crude folk music,
But meaning that the instrumentalization of the song served the song. It wasn't a self-indulgent.
no, man, there was parts that served the song. There were, it was more about the sing-alongs and round robins and what was happening as you played the songs. Very family oriented, very. It really was just a bunch of people who loved each other, that loved these songs, just kind of banging out these traditionals or these gospels or whatever. So.
So that was like your introduction to playing guitar and singing.
Yeah, that in the church.
Church, okay.
Yeah,
me
in
too.
church,
yeah,
yeah.
church. I didn't have a lot of guitar playing in church, but the idea of the instrumentalization of those songs and the songs themselves, like how I experience those.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the point, like, when did you realize that the guitar playing couldn't be just an accompaniment to the songs? Had to be an integral part of them, or was there a time?
There wasn't a time. There wasn't a time ever. Zach and I, we had played together for years, just singer-songwriter stuff, and I couldn't tell you where the
switched.
where the switch was, other than doing something on my own, like making that transition from working with a tradition to building my own tradition.
But at some point you were like, hey man, I'm playing rock and roll, and that was flipped. That was a different aesthetic, a different approach, like a certain rawness, all that. I'm playing rock and roll, and that changed the guitar work, right?
Oh yeah, rock and roll has always just been so important to me.
So we're talking rock and roll, where just so we're clear, you're talking about like anything from Chuck Berry to
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. I
all
mean,
that
it's
stuff.
just like, I mean,
Everything.
everything, man. I mean, everything.
Cramps. I mean, people talk about the Cramps. Like, yeah, all that. Like the whole lineage.
The whole lineage,
Blues,
everything.
everything.
I mean, my grandfather played trombone for a lot of big band acts in the 40s and 50s, and then my mother played a lot of like kind of Joan Baez sort of singer-songwriter folk stuff in the latter 60s, 70s, and my father was just immersed in all the rock and roll that was coming out during that time. You know, everything from, early expressions of rock and roll, whether it be Elvis or Chuck Berry or, you name it. And then, latter 60s, you had the Doors and Hendrix, and then, that graduated into Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. And so, I mean, all of those influences were just like very prominent in my life. And my older brother was kind of baptized into heavy metal, in the
Yeah,
80s.
yeah.
So you can kind of chart the lineage. And I remember sneaking into his room and listening to like old punk rock albums and everything from, the Sex Pistols to the Ramones to, I mean, just B artists like Life Sentence or, whatever. I mean, just like raw punk rock that impacted me. And then we graduated into metal. And you had all these, speed metal bands like Nuclear Assault or Napalm Death or Obituary, and Slayer has always been a mainstay with me.
Gotcha.
I mean, and so I had all of that, but when I was growing up, I was really into hip hop. And so,
Okay.
it was kind of like a break from a lot of.
So were you attracted to the groove?
I don't know what I was attracted to. I remember I heard Grandmaster Flash, and then that led me into like early forms of like Houdini, and I was kind of a huge. I mean, Scott. One thing Scott and I have in common is a love for the Fat Boys.
Yeah,
So
man.
we, a lot of the early and mid '80s hip hop was just. I mean, I liked it, man, and I was into it, and it resonated with me for whatever reason. And I remember hearing Public Enemy for the first time. I was probably like 12, and it was Fear of a Black Planet, and it was the most punk rock hip hop album I'd ever fucking heard. Yeah. And there was a marrying there for me, I think, probably.
My experience with that album was like hearing Robert Johnson blues for the first time. Like so raw, like almost like you can't quite understand what's going on, but it is this thing that I want to find. I'm supposed to like this. Almost like they're doing something that I am interested in.
To not like it would be a sin.
Sure, but you don't even realize it at the time.
No,
you're
fuck no.
You're like, hey man, this is I like this, but I don't know why I like this.
When did you find Sun House? Like where were you?
Age-wise? I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
When I was, I had been through, actually, when I was in my metal phase, like I was living with some guys in Florida where we were listening to Neurosis and Slayer. That was my first experience
Good
with
shit.
that stuff. But the guy I lived with, a couple of the guys, well, all of the guys I lived with at the time, like they grew up with the Allman Brothers and all that. And I was into Government Mule at the time. And then they were like, hey, you like this. It was like, it became the stacking thing. They would give this and that and that and that. Yeah. And then you realize, like, I want to go back to listen to all this music. I want to go back to where all that blue stuff came from. And it was like listening to punk rock for the first time. like really like raw, real, stripped down, basic chord structure, no overdubs, no. It's like really, it was like, all right, this is something that I am interested in, but I'm supposed to be interested in, but why is it important? Like, and then you start breaking it down, like, and then you listen to other people, and they even like hip hop, back to hip hop, like they sampled all that shit back in the day, like they sampled all that stuff. I was a Beastie Boys fan, and they sampled all Led Zeppelin stuff, all like that's Zeppelin is throughout all that stuff, and so for me, it was hearing that rawness, really like where it came from. Like the come almost, it's almost like a sense of desperation,
Yeah, sure.
and that's how honest that can be. And for me at that time, I had no idea what I was. I was a young guy, had no idea what I was going to do. It was like I related to that, the blues, and blues in the sense that it's raw, broken down to the essence of what it should be. Or what it was.
Yeah, and it's also like, I mean, back to the maybe initial dialogue, it's a cultural artifact. It's something to, because artifacts are narratives. Art is narrative, and you see a piece of art or you hear a song, and there's a narrative behind it, and that expresses not only the individual's experience and life, but maybe more broadly, a whole culture's voice.
Yeah.
And to stumble upon something that was done 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, is, and if you relate to it and can identify or engage with it, that's powerful.
I think we're attracted to it because of its authenticity.
Yeah,
It's real. It's not contrived at all.
No, man. I mean, there's always the bleed over of ego, but man, I just the finest artwork when you go to an exhibition or whatever, and you see that piece of art, and you can kind of engage beyond just the visual and move into the existential and the experience of it and what the artist may be feeling with the brush stroke or whatever the structure, that is powerful, man. That's really why we do art, is to say, this is our culture, this is how I feel, this is what I think, this is what I believe. And if you're not doing that, then go to Target and buy the bullshit of somebody else's anguish.
Or even not that, like the escapism, to buy the escapism, buy the escape.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's almost like my gripe with anybody that buys art, like it doesn't work with my couch. Well, then you are not buying art for the right reason because it doesn't go with your couch.
Correct.
You're buying something that's going to move you every day. You throw out these great sound bites or these great gems of advice that your dad has given you. Can you talk about your dad a bit? Like, you want to, and how, was he one of those guys that was just able to just in those moments of anguish or strife or whatever, he was put those things out that you kind of latched onto? Like, they were like for the Farmer Brown thing. The Farmer Brown, they got a graze on other. Is that from him? The graze on other.
No, that's from C.H. Spurgeon.
All right, fair enough.
The great British preacher. My dad was just really a product of his generation and his culture and his environment. He came out of Vietnam War, did 2 tours, and then went right into the hippie movement. And he loved art, and he always had these one-liners that dads do.
Sure.
And But, I mean, apart from just our personal relationship, which was very, he was a guy that was like really, you know, he was cursed with clarity. He had this ability to see the human condition, and he had developed a comedy about it, you know.
Really?
Yeah, he had really
Okay,
developed
okay. All right,
a
I
sense
wanna hear about this.
about a sense of humor about it, you know.
The ridiculous of it?
The absurdity of it, just the complete absurdity of the human condition, and he taught me humor. He taught me the ability to laugh in the face of
Despair.
yeah, man. I mean, it was very. He had seen it all. He had done it all, and there really was a sense that it's going to be okay. You know,
It is what it is.
it is what it is, and the important thing is to love people and treat everybody, you know, as if we're all on common ground, because we are. And so my dad was an example of somebody who had seen everything, you know, and was able to walk out on the other end. And he operated in a very dualistic world, in a very non-dualistic sense. He was able to divorce himself from black and white. He was trapped. I think he was trapped in hindsight in this world of gray where he understood that people are messy, they make mistakes, they fail, and if you're fortunate, you're able to forgive. And
Fortunate.
yeah, yeah. Because in a soundbite culture where, you know, the enemy is immediately thrown up on the screen, you know, I think he was able to see the complexity of those things. And he operated out. He operated out of a sense of grace because I think he understood it. He understood the depravity of people. I think he also understood that there was a second chance and an opportunity to
For redemption.
yeah, and outside of humor, you know, outside of the ability to laugh at the absurdity of things, I mean, you just go fucking crazy, man. I mean, life is fucking crazy. It's a
He was able to go, we're all fucked up.
yeah, he was able to say we're all fucked up. And I think one of his biggest contributions for me was, you've seen my sin, now let me see yours. Which was...
Well, folks don't like that.
no, they don't like that.
They don't
But I mean, I think it's important to take moral inventories of yourself, moral inventories of your judgments. And
So he was a reminder of that.
he was a reminder of that, and he was also an example of how bad you can be at that. So he lived in the dichotomy and yet reinforced the non-dualism, which is probably more accurate to most of our experiences in life.
Man.
So he was a good man. He was a complicated man. We fought hard, but towards the end of his life, we really...
Why do you pick up on those things he said, do you think?
Because I think they're true.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're true.
Great. So, Back to the question, is it harder to be a singer or a guitar player?
It's harder to be a guitar player.
Why? You know that one.
Because I'm a caveman.
Because your fingers are too big? Is that what
My fingers do whatever the fuck they want, man. I've seen like pristine, like, perfect performances of guitar players, and I admire it, man. I
do you
envy it.
really?
Oh, I envy it.
Do you?
Fuck yeah, dude. Like, but I'm just not. I'm not of that pedigree. I'm not of that.
Yeah, the noodling is like, I appreciate it. I do.
Not even a
appreciate
fucking noodling. Hit a G chord.
it.
The
And
same.
I'm also like, I'm the guy that's like the G chord that's not the normal G chord. You know what I'm saying? Like something.
That's all my chords.
Yeah. True. We'll get into that. I've got a question for that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's being able to do what you're not supposed to do. Because all right, so you open that bag a bit. So I'm a guitar player. Every time I see you play chords, you're coming at it from the back door. It makes a different sound. It's a G chord, but it's not a G chord. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not a G chord. It's a G chord, but it doesn't sound like the singer-songwriter open G. I mean, it's not even like a bar chord almost. It's like this cross between a power chord and some kind of like Spanish variation even. You're just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I am just making that. I know that these three notes, but those other three notes, that makes a G chord. Is it like that?
I don't know what it's like. I
All
think
right.
it's I got two left hands. My father was left-handed, and I'm probably naturally left-handed, but I went to Catholic school, and they really discouraged, working with, your left hand. And so,
Side note, I'm left eye dominant, so like shoot guns or all that stuff. Everything's
Soft flip.
Soft flip. I shoot left-handed.
you're goofy-footed.
Yeah, and then but I draw with my right hand.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Well,
but
it's the same with me, but it's because it was kind of like, I think, enforced upon me. And I don't remember the question.
Is guitar playing harder than singing?
That's a good cut right there.
Guitar playing versus singing, is it better than the other? We were talking about, like, I don't even know, we were talking about G chords. And
I fantasize about the days when, like there's a part of me that just is like wants to just fucking, get rid of the guitar, really,
Okay.
ultimately. Yeah. And say, I'm fucking done with it. I hate you.
I just want to sing. Let somebody else play it?
Well, yeah, because like when I first started writing music, I wrote music so that I could write.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
music was the conduit in which I could like express myself, and so it's always been a pain in the ass. It's always been a pain in the ass.
It's a tool.
And one I'm not very good at.
Well, I
For the
disagree,
record.
but
For
okay.
the record.
Disagree.
I mean, there's like
disagree.
there's technicians, and then there's feelers, and the technicians are able to just completely, hit, those notes and those chords, and sometimes they're just absolutely gorgeous, and to not hit those notes and to not hit those chords with the degree of precision would be sinful.
Sinful.
Yeah, I mean, it's like those notes and those chords are meant to be heard that way. And
It's a waste of time.
so in my mind, it's like maybe I've taken the low road, and I just have clumsy, brutish fingers and hands, and I'm not just trying to discourage anybody from coming to our live shows, but
Yeah, I didn't ask
There's
about
a
the
lot of
quality.
imperfection going on
didn't ask about the quality of those imperfections. I didn't say that at all, folks. You're.
I mean, sometimes I hear like a song that we did in the studio, and I'm like, oh, man, I don't play that song like that. And it's not because it wasn't recorded that way. It was recorded that way, but it was because I had my tongue out the side of my mouth, like biting down on it, trying to get that fucking chord.
It's like I just watched Kevin Costner in Dances with Wolves. He pulls on his boot at the beginning, like bites down, like they're like just like that. It's like I gotta pull that cord out, make it happen. It hurts
you gotta,
so bad.
You gotta fight for that shit sometimes, and there's no honor in it. Just do the fucking deal.
Gotta get it done.
Just get the fucking thing done, man. You know.
All right, let's talk about something that's a little different than we've been talking about. You and I have had conversations about the scene, the art scene, and the community, and building community, and all that stuff. And like how do you negotiate the scene? How do you define the scene?
Do you mean like Colombia or?
Well, let's just say no. Let's not be specific yet. Let's talk about like in general, like any community, like how like any city. Mm-hmm. How should the scene work for the artists that are trying to do something different that maybe it's not so much commercial? Can you answer that question?
I mean, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called The Tipping Point,
Mm-hmm.
which is maybe an important contribution to understanding how movements gain traction and so forth. And it's typically multifaceted. There's a lot of things happening that build or posture a scene for success. And I don't really, I mean, not to sound pretentious, but I hate the fucking word scene because it almost insinuates sort of a fickle nature, something that's there and then not.
That's interesting. Like it's like a flavor of the month.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, there's pop art. If you're really serious about what you're doing, you hope your work isn't pop art. You know, but I mean, Seattle didn't just happen. I say this a lot. It's like L.A. in the 70s and 80s didn't just happen. You know, New York's art scene didn't just happen. It was a lot of different things, you know, happening that contributed to that. But
Finger on the pulse type thing?
Finger on the pulse and a lot of fucking investment and commitment. You know,
like we were going to do this.
Yeah, beyond just the superficial. You know, I think there, you know, you had people, you know, going hungry to see their community's contribution in art become, you know,
be uplifted.
Yeah, to have a broader spectrum, to have a, you know, a more attractive appeal universally. And so I think there's just, however you're talking about the music scene or the art scene, I think you're immediately disqualified unless you are extremely intentional about building that up and fostering.
Participating.
Yeah, well, participating and investing.
Was there a difference between in participating and investing?
Participating is one point or one part of investing. Purchasing the art that you admire, coming alongside the artist and networking with them, providing a lot of different forms of support is important. Like just showing up to your monthly city's art thing is not enough. It's just not. I mean, period.
Unless you do it every time and you buy something.
I mean, yeah, buying something is important and showing up is important, but what is equally important is believing in what the artist is doing and then promoting it and pushing it and wanting it to succeed because you believe in it. It's an ideal, it's a narrative. I mean, all art is a narrative, back to, you know, to our previous conversation.
And I'm gonna expand on that in a minute. But yeah. And we have to have that.
It's part and parcel with any kind of successful art movement. You know. And it's shaking hands with like a lot of different types of artists. It's, you know, I mean, I'm always, you know, thinking of the Velvet Underground and Andy Warhol.
Yeah, you're right, absolutely.
I mean, that's maybe be like, that might be
But that's
considered a cliche example, but what you had is a true partnership that crossed the aisles. And that's powerful. That can impact a community, it can impact a narrative, it can impact the tone of how people talk about art and how people understand each other. See, art to me is not so much about the aesthetic, it's just more, it also is in tandem about understanding each other. And if you're not invested in understanding each other and dissolving the potential boundaries, then it's just a pretty picture.
I always feel in Columbia since I've moved back.
Are we talking about Columbia now?
No, well, I am. I'm segueing more specifically.
Okay.
Like we're almost to that point, what you're talking about. Like and we don't. You
I got
find
one.
it later.
I got one.
And it gets short circuited sometimes. A lot of the times. I'm not going to lie. It's a lot of the times it gets short circuited. Why does the scene get short circuited?
In Columbia?
Yeah, I'm saying in Columbia now. Because you were talking about New York, and we were talking San Francisco, and you know, your dad, and all this stuff. Like these scenes that happen, they just don't happen by accident. Like, I just feel like sometimes we have this perfect mixture, but it gets short circuited. Like why? Why does it get short? Do we know why? Do I know why? Is it the gatekeepers decide these things? I don't know.
No, it's laziness on both ends.
The artist end too. Like we're putting the responsibility back on us. Okay,
Absolutely.
All right. So how? Like why? What am I doing wrong? Like when I say what am I doing wrong? I'm talking about in the general sense. Like as artists, what are we doing wrong in your opinion? Can you even say that? I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. I would say for me, I moved to Columbia like 4.5 years ago, and I remember walking into a music store that sold music, and I dropped a garage rock band I'd been playing in and had written for, and it's a great record store. I love the fucking record store. Highest praise known to man. But this particular person, when I handed them my music, they said, and I was like, I'm looking for musicians in Columbia. I would like to start up an act. I mean, it was super DIY. I didn't know anybody, man. And they literally took the CDs and they're like, I'll make sure somebody hears them. And then put them behind their fucking head.
On the shelf, like right behind them?
Yeah. And I remember thinking to myself, all right, motherfucker, fuck you. I'll be the change that I want. And the change I want is the record store people, the coffee shop owners, the people that are going to the shows to be excited and even possibly ambitious about seeing this stuff come up. I mean, yeah, a lot of it's shit. It's just bullshit. It's never going to materialize. But there's diamonds in the rough. There's good musicians. There's good artists, man. There's a fantastic pool of talent in Columbia, South Carolina.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I think it takes a lot of effort on a lot of different fronts, but ultimately be the change you want to see. Like make it happen.
But with that said, there are people when you say that and you do things outside the peripheral. People resist it.
So what?
Yeah, I hear you so well, but there are gatekeepers that delineate that negotiation. How do we find that? Just do what you do.
I don't know, man. Become an asshole. I have no idea.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I mean,
you and I have been very.
You have to believe in your work, and you have to you have to be really passionate about what you do, and you have to really get used to criticism.
Right. Yeah.
And you have to develop a thick skin, and you have to be able to say, "All right, I'll take that. That's true." But this other part is just completely misrepresented. And allow the criticism to spur you on. And it's not easy, man. Like, I mean, we could do this vodcast or podcast, whatever the fuck they call it these days, and I could get crucified.
Sure.
And
just for saying that.
For whatever the fuck I said, you know, it's a witch hunt culture. But to take that and go, okay, like, I'm going to take the good with the bad, chip the meat, spit up the bones, and forge forward, I think is the artists. Like, I think if you're going to be an artist and you're going to create, you just need to accept that that's part of it.
And as artists, we have to kind of push forward, push against that all constantly. Like,
Constantly.
Be willing to take on that mantle, like in a way, like piss people off, like make people feel uncomfortable. Like that's what we're supposed to do. Like the work should make people feel uncomfortable. They should not in a way that's just to fuck you, but it's going to take you out of your comfort zone.
I think provocative artwork done well is very important. I don't think that can ever be the motive.
Okay.
I think you have to create from a pure place and find that tabula rasa, that empty slate. And
in a way, like turning the mirror up. Like
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, back to the point with Columbia, I think Columbia is poised for a lot of amazing things. I think.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that.
I remember, I mean, one of the reasons I live here is I was traveling through here when I was like 16, and they had a great punk rock scene. I mean, it was messy and ugly, and I'm sure, you know, people that are part of Columbia.
It's like late 90s?
Right? Yeah. And it was vibrant. It was really, there was a buzz. And even if you've never been here before, as soon as you stepped in town, you felt like there's a lot of creative energy. And I don't know what dissolves that, but I do know what serves that.
Okay.
And maybe it's just a lack of serving.
Serving, I like that idea, the service.
Yeah, like you serve people, man. I mean, yeah, you want to get paid and you want to, you know, be successful monetarily with your art. But I think one thing Scott and I do is we do free shows. You know, it's not what it's not always convenient for us.
Right.
People, you know, love the artwork, but then, you know, that sometimes it's difficult because, you know, you're playing for very little money.
And also do like free it's like free tacos. Get free tacos.
Yeah, sure.
You get to eat.
Yeah, you get to eat. And I just think it's important for the artists to pour back into the community, meanwhile being intentional about raising up their own, you know, building the bar for artists in the community.
So one of the things I want to cover before we go into lightning round, you've mentioned this, and well, you and I have talked about it enough. Even if you want to go back and look at some of the other interviews you've done, it's the idea of narrative in your work. when I go back to the why, like somebody says, why are you doing this? Why are you making art? Why are you choosing to make this path in your life? Like I've got a story to tell. Why do you think that we are storytellers, or why is that important just to tell a story? Until it's just making art for art's sake, why are we trying to tell stories in the work we make? Can you answer that?
I mean, everybody has a different, I think, probably reason for that. I think maybe more now than ever, you know, we're moving very fast as a culture. We're moving very fast technologically, industrially. The world's getting much smaller. I think there's a deeper need in people to feel a sense of belonging, a sense of narrative, a sense of origin.
Okay.
I mean, ultimately, narrative is about finding yourself in the story. And I think that that's often left out. And so narrative becomes, I mean, I can only speak for myself. I really don't. I don't want to wax cold on my own philosophy on why I do what I do. But to tell a story becomes how people connect with each other. You hear a song on the radio, whatever the fuck it may be, and you love the song, and you tell your friend, I love this song, this is what I like about this song, and they're like, yeah, man, I feel that way too, and that becomes a story, and that becomes the most human.
Right.
That becomes the most human thing you can do in a world where you feel very unhuman, when you feel very
Isolated.
yeah, completely disconnected. You're engaging mostly, and I do emphasize this, mostly through superficial means.
Yes, we do.
Then narrative becomes very important, and if
And even in those superficial means, narrative becomes this malleable medium that they can make up their own story. But then I think what art does is it provide this authentic story that people can latch onto, like a book.
mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and that it's different than our own story. It's almost like if I made this superhero story about myself, like generally people are like, oh, we've heard that. But they're much more interested in the real story about how that person came about being.
Absolutely, and perhaps the more, and I would say that the more valuable thing is to correct the narratives in your story. So, engaging with diversity is very important because what it does is it puts your story and who you are and your experiences up on a big screen.
Okay.
And you're able to spot, if it's a real dialogue and a real relationship,
Okay.
You're able to spot the
Chinks in the armor, or
yeah, maybe just the wrong thinking, to change your stinking thinking about your
the
narrative.
willingness to like put it out.
Yeah, because there's your personal narrative, and then there's the meta narrative, the bigger story.
Right.
And so I think, that's part of telling stories. That's what's appealing to me, is that I learn from you. My prejudice is highlighted, and I'm able to grow and understand, better what is really true. And so art is the conduit for that, if we allow it to be.
Yeah, and that's back to the idea of narrative. Like a lot of people don't realize that the idea of narrative is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yeah,
You know?
Absolutely.
Like, what can I learn from this character in the story? Am I that character? Am I the other? Am I the antagonist?
Mm-hmm.
Causing that character to do that. People, I don't think people normally see. We're in a position in society where we can control that narrative.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
We can't quite. We're not willing to put ourselves in all the roles to understand how that.
we're willing to sacrifice self-reflection in our own narrative for a soundbite culture where everything's kind of patched in and we develop our ideology accordingly rather than self-reflection and
Because self-reflection is a scary process.
it's terrifying.
Yeah,
It's
right.
fucking terrifying.
And most people don't want to take on
Fuck
that.
no, man. Do you like it? I don't.
No,
like
I don't
it.
like it, but I welcome it. You know, I'm conscious of it, but I don't think I don't think as a society they're conscious of it. And that's why the story thing, and story is a lubricant to take take that trail, take that path, to look at yourself in a way that's not very nice.
It's. I mean, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, it's an uncomfortable existence, but yeah, hopefully, because I think some of my most valued relationships are relationships that are built out of complete, polar opposites. We're coming from different contexts, different life experiences, different classes, different races. And when they tell their story, whether it's, an antidote to something else or a joke or whatever, or just how you fucking cook, it becomes more like the kingdom of God.
Oh, wow.
That's the key, is that we want to connect. We want Zion, but we're fighting, in especially Western culture, we're really fighting against it in crusading and fighting for our causes. I think that the more ancient way, the wiser way, is to shut the fuck up. Listen, get engaged, develop relationships that you cannot break because you've developed a love for the individual or a love for their story. And I find it extremely frustrating in our contemporary culture where, oh, they said that? Bam! And that's the fucking response. And I would say it's not a response, it's a reaction. We're very reactional as a species.
Is it proactive?
We're reactional as a species, and if we want to fucking evolve, we need to respond. We need to create.
Well, proactive. We need to be proactive, like thinking about, how would someone else respond?
Yeah, find yourself in their narrative. Find yourself in their story. Like when I tell a story, it could be humorous or it could be sad or it could be happy, but it's a true story when everybody in the room is laughing or everybody in the room is crying or everybody in the room is sitting there with their, fucking fist under their chin thinking about everything because they found themselves in your narrative. And if we can bridge that gap, if we can begin to do that outside of social media or outside of the polemic that we're being fed, then that becomes something.
Well, I think that's what art's supposed to do.
That's exactly what art's supposed to do.
Yeah. When anybody asks me what I hope happens after someone encounters my work, it's like when they're the next day, next week, they sit and they think about what they just went through.
Yeah. I mean, my philosophy has always been, you've seen my sin, show me yours. It's like,
There it
I mean,
is, there it is, there it
it's
is.
like
It's-
if you want to cast judgment, and there's a lot of judgment to be had, there's a lot of filth and debauchery in the world that needs
Sure.
to be held accountable. But ultimately, it's a call for authenticity and honesty and transparency, which are words that we use, we slap them on a lot of different
We do,
things today.
yeah. Like it's
Right.
a media soundbite for sure.
Absolutely, man. But I think it's valuable. I really do. Like, I'm not.
No, I don't.
I think there's always, whenever you're headed towards a collision, there's a tendency to fucking yank the wheel one way, and that can be really fucking damaging. I mean, you can take a lot of people out that way. I think it's important to like study the fucking book, man, and fucking tap your brakes, and
Study the book.
read other people, listen to other people, talk to other people, and
But also too, realizing that your story ain't always right.
your story is often not right.
Right. Right. It's not. But you have to be willing to like this is my experience. It could veer here and there. I could be the hero or the villain.
Yeah, man. I mean, I remember when Crash came out. You have this. I mean, it was popular in certain circles because it showed the heroic nature of people, and then the villain.
Yeah. Right.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely focused in on the villain. That.
It did, and I
But
would.
the flaw of the villain, the flaw, everything that made them bad.
Uh-huh.
Like but in the moment, like there was redemption. Right?
I'm a weirdo, man. I really feel like there's always a redemptive ending.
I think there always is. I always think that. I agree.
I want to believe that.
That's the secret optimistic person and the optimist in my. Because generally I'm a cynic. Like I am like the cynic.
Mm-hmm.
Like I am not. I am always going to see the bad side of some folks, and that's just that's my fault. That's a character flaw of mine. I tell people all the time, my expectations are way too high for you. That's a character flaw, and I admit that. But I hope in that, like you can redeem yourself, and I hope I can redeem myself.
I would just say, wait for Act 3.
Yes,
You have Act 1, I mean, everything's perfect, and then you have Act 2, and everything looks like fucking bullshit. And then, the heroes died in Act 2, and everything's shitty.
Everything's bad.
Everything's bad.
Everything's bad.
Whatever the fuck it is. And then there's an Act 3 that I think with, I choose to believe this, I'm a presuppositionalist where I don't have any facts to back this up, but I choose to believe that there's a redemptive aspect in everybody, and that there is a happy ending. Do I feel that way all the time?
No.
No. Tuesdays and Thursdays, don't even fucking talk
What is it about Tuesdays and Thursdays, man? I'm with you on the Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Right after the weekend and right before the
Faith
weekend.
always had it. She's like, you always struggle on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's my day, man. Faith tells me all the time. She's like, hey, I say it's Tuesday.
I always tell my mom and my brother, I'm like, look, I'm an atheist on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Don't even fucking talk to me, man. I mean,
I'm that guy.
it's just sloppy like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the thing that counts is that through the rest of the days of the week, when the opportunity arises, like, fucking make the difference, man. Like, plug in. Yeah, plug into what's real,
Oh, people are scared of it, though.
I'm terrified of it. That's why I do it. It's a fight or flight syndrome. You can either choose to run away from it or you can fight it. And both paradigms have ugly faces to them.
True.
Like you can fight for something and it be the wrong way to fight for it, or you can run from something and it may be the wrong way to run from something. I think we live in a very dualistic culture, and what we're experiencing is hopefully an enlightenment to a non-dualistic culture.
Yeah, it's dualistic. It's split between the middle, ain't it?
No, absolutely. And that's just not the human experience. That's not the human condition, and that's not how we live life.
No, it's not how we live life. It's a lot more gray.
It's a lot more gray, and it requires a lot more forgiveness and kindness and grace.
But all that, like forgiveness and kindness and grace, it comes from a place personally, for me personally, as that I'm not right ever.
How could you be?
But there are people are.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here we go. No, you didn't just burn a hole in your shirt.
Damn, dude. It's already got a hole in it.
I gotta make you some shirts. All right, so lightning round here. We are Saul Seibert, Boo Hag. Lightning round. Here we go. That's it. First one. All right, so you talk about, are you colorblind?
Next question.
No, next question. His answer is yes.
I wouldn't know.
He don't see folks like we do.
Testify was shot in black and white.
Worst band you've ever seen.
Man, dude, like
It's bad. Like, can you find one? Like, no, you should not be playing at all. Like, are
okay,
you,
so
or you're not
I don't
gonna
even
go
know
for
the
that?
name of the band, man. But Scott,
Can you give us a year and a date?
It was like last year. It had to be the worst band I've ever seen. We were on tour, and I don't remember where the fuck we were. We were up in North Carolina somewhere, and the headliner was like just blowing up all over the press or whatever. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's the worst band, but it was definitely the most memorable, horrendous experience I've had on the road. It was absolutely a bizarre night. We traveled probably 6 miles to a bar, and I was insulted.
You were insulted.
Yeah, insulted and assaulted within like probably 30 minutes of us being at the bar.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not going to go into that, but so we went up and we grabbed some food, and then we came back to the bar, and the headliner was kind of pushed in the press and in the newspapers and everything as this kind of great artist or whatever, and we were like second on the bill, so there was like 3 bands. And we show up, and there's the sound guy doesn't speak a lick of English.
No way, really?
Yeah, and which whatever. I'll whatever the fuck.
You can
turn
roll
the volume up, turn the reverb up, turn this down, whatever the fuck. But about 15 minutes before we go on, the sound guy's like, "Can I play your drums?" So he just beats the fuck out of Scott's drums.
No way, really?
Yeah. And then disappears. And we're on, And there's no sound. I mean, it was like a slow goddamn train wreck. You could just see it fucking dissolving as it went. And then this band comes up, and it's 2 guys, and so I'm always generous to, 2 band acts, 2 people in the band. I'm like, God damn, I understand, But he had, I don't know how to even talk about this without like creating this huge elaborate picture. He had this like backdrop, and he was wearing this polyester shirt, and it was all like fucking full of flowers and scenery and shit, and it was fucking awful. It was like, I mean, I can't even begin to describe how bad it was. It was atrocious. And Scott and I are usually one of those guys that's like, we stick through the fucking acts.
Right.
If we're on the bill, we watch the bands. We're there. We're supportive. We're all of these things. I had to fucking walk out, man. I was just like, I was embarrassed. You ever have those like experiences where, I mean, it sounds really pretentious, but it's like, you see the band and you're like, oh, fuck, everything inside of you is like cringing and,
Wasn't working.
Yeah. I would say that as far as like big bands and big acts, I went to Riot Fest about 5 years ago and I saw Weezer.
Okay.
It was just fucking awful, man.
Bad.
Just, oh my God, dude, just shitty. Just shitty. Uninspired, tired, burned out. We're gonna tour this Blue album.
We're gonna do it.
We haven't played it in 20 fucking years. We're gonna pull it off, and it just didn't. I think I like maybe stayed for 4 songs or some shit like that, and went and got a hot dog.
Chili with onions. Cheddar on top.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen countless shitty bands. Don't get me wrong.
No, you're
like I'm in the music
There's that
industry,
one, that's
so
that
it's just
one.
like there's lots of shitty bands. I saw Slayer that same year, and I was just like, holy shit, fuck, dude. How do you do this after 30 years and still be fucking pulling it off? And these guys are just, goddamn, man, they're fire. Lightning in a bottle, man. Just like fucking right there. Just
Moonshine.
on it.
It's moonshine.
On it, baby.
All right, so I'm at 1 word, 2 words. Your mom.
Good woman.
Keep straight
Sometimes.
sometimes. She veers you off.
My mom and I get along.
Bigfoot.
Man, come on.
Bigfoot. Yes or no?
What do we got, like 300 million people in America?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Something like that. Yeah, around that time.
And we elect one man to govern all them people? Bigfoot, baby.
It ain't real.
I mean,
What's
come
up
on, it's
there?
easier to believe in Bigfoot than that bullshit.
We've been in group social situations a lot. And on
Properly lit right now.
yeah, and we speaking of Bigfoot, I mean, it comes right wrong. The weather, like how we do the weather thing. I like weather. I like to bitch about the weather.
Yeah.
But you've made me realize that that's the common ground. We all can kind of comment on the weather in a social situation.
Weather's go-to. And it's cliche, but go to it. Like, I mean, weather's everybody's experiencing it.
and I think Northerners have a different experience. Like Southerners have a different experience with the weather. Like it's this schizophrenic experience of how the year goes by when we live in the South.
Well, it's an agricultural thing. So, I mean, weather for Northerners looks different for weather for people in the South and how they plant.
Well, in the North, you can expect the snow and the ice until May.
Yeah, fuck
Here,
that
it's like
shit.
you might get snow and ice, and the next day you get 78-degree weather, and you're wearing shorts.
The insanity of it is I'd rather take the latter
Yeah.
than the former. I think I just don't do good in gray skies and fucking months on end and cold. I don't like sweating my ass off. Fuck that shit, man. I hate it. I hate the humidity. I hate the heat, but I mean, what are you gonna do?
No,
They should call them fortune tellers though, because they're about as accurate as forecasters.
that's a great one, man. That's right. They're like, they're gypsies.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Something,
Mother Earth is gonna do what she does. You just fucking submit.
Okay, so last one. Favorite book. Do you have a favorite book?
It's hard because books are conversations. It's your ability to
With yourself.
yeah, but also with the author. It's a dialogue. The whole time you're reading a book, you're dialoguing. And there's been books that have definitely impacted me. On a more fictional, fun level, Sophie's World was really fun for me. A Confederacy of Dunces was really familiar to me, being written about New Orleans and the people in New Orleans. On a philosophical level, thus spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche. Jean-Paul Sartre just rules, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Probably find some of that stuff up there.
Huh?
Probably find some of that stuff up
Oh,
there.
yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just like a Being
Or
in
in there in the
Nothingness
house,
is
yeah,
a great book. It takes years to kind of wade through, but
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Those are the books that take a little longer to digest.
sure, but they're important.
Sure.
And they matter. I mean, Hemingway was real big for me. And it's weird because, like, Old Man and the Sea was so important to me when I read it, and I couldn't figure out why, I'm not quite sure I still know why, but it's a book I continually go back to. Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Raphael Rudnick.
Were you ever a Jack London guy?
No.
No, not Jack London. Hemingway, but not Jack London.
Yeah, I liked Hemingway's. I liked his inability to communicate things.
He's much more abstract.
Well, he was just fucking like letting a pen do it, and I really, he didn't care if it came out right or wrong. He was just like, it was cathartic to him, and at the end of the day, I think for Hemingway readers, they got that about him. I liked a lot of the beat writers. In some ways, I'm just like
Kerouac on the road type thing, like.
Kerouac on the road. I liked listening to Kerouac more than I did reading him. Bukowski, definitely more readings than seeing him.
Yes.
All those guys. I was a big fan of.
Were you a Ginsberg guy?
I like Ginsberg. My portfolio starts narrowing because my age started getting larger.
Right. Yeah. I get it.
And
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I mean, it's some of that stuff is just really college luxury.
It is.
It really is.
It is.
And if you have the freedom and you have the time, you can digest these great works. But
the freedom and the time, like really to digest, like reading and sitting in silence and listening to what you just read.
Fucking A.
Like those are some, those authors are those. That's what they demand of their writing.
Yeah, and anything that's worthwhile and digesting is worth, mulling over and chewing on, and getting all the flavors and the tones of the dish, and so.
Tones of the dish.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm not sure if that makes sense.
No. Well, everything we talked about today, cooking could be the metaphor.
Fucking A, man. Cooking is everything.
You know what I mean? Like ingredients and meat and seasoning you put on the meat, how it affects the taste. Serve it.
Yeah, man.
I think literature is the perfect analogy.
It could be. I think, cooking is definitely an art, and it's an expression and a cultural contribution.
I talked at the beginning of the podcast. I talked about when I started making drawings. I wanted to make a drawing that you could hear, but maybe I want to make art that's that you can taste.
Red beans and rice, baby.
Red beans.
Gumbo,
thing.
jambalaya, and etouffee.
Yeah,
Shit.
etouffee,
When's
yeah.
the tacos? You're making tacos tonight.
Tacos, that's right. I'm hungry.
No, I think poverty is the innovation of great work. But yeah, I think the more Kafka was a big influence on me.
Kafka, yes.
Yeah, Kafka was
Yes.
probably the artist or the writer that really, I read the Metamorphosis, and that, I was like 15 when I read it, and then strangely enough, I read Kierkegaard's Either Or, and then I read
After that?
Yeah, I was just fucking all over the map, and
It's funny how you find things.
little fucking jewels along the way. Yeah, and they communicated ideas that resonated with me, and so I'm not sure there's a single piece of literature. I went to school for Hebrew and ancient language, and so I certainly love the myths, and yeah, I certainly love those things, but that's it.
Saul, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
It's been awesome.
Absolutely.
And the outtakes are going to be double the price, so get on that. See y'all next time.
Tacos.
Tacos. I'm hungry. Let's get tacos.
Fucking tacos, baby. Let's get some fucking tacos.